We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made. And so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
That Tucker Carlson interview with GOP vice presidential pick JD Vance dating back to 2021 has now come back to bite JD Vance right in the ass. Because that kind of messaging doesn't really play so well when you're trying to attract independent voters at a time when not Joe Biden, but Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee to basically run against Donald Trump in the general election. Now, after that video resurfaced, and again, it dates back to July of 2021, a bunch of articles were written about it. Obviously, a lot of women were unhappy about him referring to childless women as, miserable cat ladies. Harris, by the way, became a stepmother to 2 teenagers when she married entertainment lawyer Douglas Emhoff in 2014. And the attacks against Pete Buttigieg, pretty gross as well. He announced that he and his husband adopted infant twins in September of 2021. So a few months after JD Vance made those statements. And by the way, Buttigieg weighed in on that interview just last night while speaking on CNN. So let's take a look at that.
The really sad thing is he said that after Chasten and I had been through a fairly heartbreaking setback in our adoption journey. He couldn't have known that, but maybe that's why you shouldn't be talking about other people's children. And it's not about his kids or my kids or the vice president's family. It's about your family, people's families whose well-being will depend on whether we go into a future led by somebody like Kamala Harris, or do you want your children to grow up in a country defined by a return to the chaos and recrimination and cruelty that was the hallmark of the Trump era?
So I like what Buttigieg had to say there because he's touching on something that is, in my opinion, a big problem with the GOP's messaging as it pertains to some of the culture war issues and the side that they like to take on those culture war issues. They like to simplify incredibly nuanced and complicated matters. So when JD Vance makes that statement about women who don't have children, he doesn't understand that he's actually insulting various groups of people. His assumption is that, oh, well, couples who don't have kids or women who don't have kids, they're childless by choice, right? They're selfish, they've decided against it, they're miserable women. He's obviously tapping into a ridiculous stereotype, but you also have to consider the fact that there are plenty of women out there who want to have families. They haven't found the right partner for them yet. They want to ensure that they have a dependable partner to have children with. There are women who desperately want to conceive, but cannot conceive for whatever reason. And by the way, you have Republicans now attacking in vitro fertilization to make it more likely for women who are having difficulty conceiving to be able to have children. There are also women out there who are step parents, right? And that kind of messaging doesn't really appeal to those women as well. And so it's interesting, Cenk, because Kamala Harris is a complicated candidate, okay? I don't know who she really is. She tends to kind of go with the flow and what's popular or trendy at any given moment. But what I will say about her is that she has been attempting to appeal to corporate America a lot more, and we're gonna talk about that later on in the show. I read about those things and it makes me dislike Kamala Harris as a candidate. And then that's immediately followed up by Republican attacks like this against women in general. And I'm like, I don't like that either. I don't like that at all, right?
Yeah, well, look, the Republicans constantly disqualify themselves from huge sections of America. And remember, both the Republicans and the Democrats take corporate money. So that's kind of a tie. So then for the tiebreaker, you go to who can you stomach? And let alone the Supreme Court, let alone other things that we care about. But when you have Republicans that purposely insult the great majority of the country, it's the worst electoral strategy. They just can't help themselves. So let me break it down a little further based on what Anna was saying. First of all, Kamala Harris has 2 stepdaughters. That's from the second dude, Doug Emhoff's earlier marriage, right?
Gentleman.
Sorry, second gentleman. Okay, and so. What he's saying and is in calling her a cat lady is kids don't count. Well, there goes millions of voters, right, who feel incredibly insulted by that. So then how about the women who can't have kids? And now you're useless cat ladies? Oh my God, there goes millions of more votes, right? And then the women who chose not to have kids, either they didn't get married or they got married, but they didn't want kids, there goes millions of more votes. I mean, because these are so directly, personally insulting. You're insulting the identity of these people, you're making fun of them, you're making fun of the lifestyle choices that they made. And so that's where we get into both polling and the instincts of Republicans.
Yeah, I have to add one more thing to that, Cenk, because it's not just that he stereotypes, women who don't have children. He goes even further than that because he claims that those who don't have kids have no stake in America. That is so outrageous. Okay, yeah. By the way, as a woman who doesn't have children, of course I have a stake in America. I love this country. I want to protect this country. I want wonderful things for people who live in this country. And the idea that I have no stake in the country is one of the most insulting things to hear from a politician.
Yeah, it's super dumb in every conceivable way, factually wrong, politically, strategically wrong. So, and one other absurd thing that he said within that quick 30-second bite there was he talked about how these childless cat ladies were running politics and the corporate oligarchy.
What?
Are there a lot of motherless women who are CEOs and executives of the giant corporations? I've never heard that. What a crazy out of left field attack. And by the way, this guy, he's always talking about, I'm against the corporate oligarchy because he knows that polls well, and hence he's a fake populist. But at the same time, he's like, now remember, if we get into office, more tax cuts for corporations and more deregulation so corporations can hurt you, can hurt the community, as long as they make infinite money. But I'm against the corporate oligarchy. Okay, now back to the women issue. The polling indicates that single women are much, much more likely to vote for Democrats. Women with no kids are more likely to vote for Democrats. But there's no causality there. I mean, there could be because of the policies of Democrats and Republicans, but you're not going to fix that by just taking those women and forcing them into marriage and forcing them to have kids. But these knuckleheads don't understand science at all.
Yeah, actually, Cenk, it's even worse than that, right? Because one might just look at this surface level and think, well, the Republican Party never really did well with women anyway, so who cares, right? They're not really hurting themselves with this messaging because they're insulting a demographic that wasn't with them to begin with. But that's actually not true. What was really surprising, I did not know this, women voters turned out at higher rates than men in 2022, and that's essentially what prevented the so-called red wave from happening. Also, Trump had far more support from women voters back in 2020 versus today. And JD Vance has become a bit of a liability toward Trump when it comes to maintaining the support Trump had with women to begin with. And so I want to go to this next clip because there is some polling about how JD Vance might actually be dragging down the ticket overall. So let's take a look at that and I'll give you more details.
We take a look at the net favorable rating for JD Vance. That's a favorable minus unfavorable. It's a negative net territory. Look at that, -6 points. I will tell you, Aaron, I have gone all the way back since 1980. He is the first guy after immediately following a convention, a VP pick, who actually had a net negative favorable rating. That is underwater. The average since 2000 is plus 19 points. JD Vance making history in the completely wrong way.
Hey, don't scroll away. Come back. Because before the video continues, we just want to urge you to lend your support to TYT. You power our honest reporting. You do it at tyt.com/team, and we love you for it.
And look, I remember when Trump had announced that JD Vance was his VP pick. I follow conservative media. I want to know what they're saying. I want to understand their perspective. They weren't really happy with JD Vance. They couldn't really understand why Trump took the risk of going with Vance. And so now you're kind of starting to see it play out, and the polling indicates that he might be actually dragging the ticket down altogether. But I have more details. Polls have consistently shown that the proportion of women planning to vote for him this November is smaller, meaning vote for Trump, is smaller this November than those who did in 2020. That's what I was referring to earlier. And Vance has nothing to offer Trump on this score. Quite the reverse. He risks compounding his boss's problem.
So two things about that, and then I want to get back to the so-called cat ladies. So you remember who made this pick for Donald Trump, who convinced him to pick him? Beavis and Butthead, his two dumbass sons. He was going to pick Doug Burgum and make the business community and the establishment a little bit more at home. Look, I don't necessarily think that any of those guys are good guys, and I don't care about the donor community feeling more at home with Trump. But at least there was some strategic sense, and Beavis and Butthead came in, and they're like, "No, Daddy, no, let's double down on MAGA. We're going to win anyway." Oops. So back then, of course, Joe Biden was in the race and they were gonna win. It was pretty much a lock, but they couldn't foresee that, hey, Joe Biden might not be in the race a week later, and now all of a sudden you're the underdogs. So very, very poorly played. And guys, this is what I keep coming back to. They cannot get outside of their own perspective. So in their perspective, yeah, you make fun of single women or women without kids. What's their point? They're useless without kids. Yeah, but women don't think that. They don't think that they're useless without kids. You, Neanderthal, think that. And they assume that everybody does. It's so unbelievably dumb.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, his messaging in the past has been so extreme, and not just unpopular with women, but unpopular with a lot of men as well. So for instance, in 2021, he suggested ending marriages that were maybe even violent as selfish. This is one of the great tricks that the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, he said, making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear. He essentially has advocated for women to remain in abusive relationships or for couples who are in unhappy marriages to remain together out of the sake of the children. For the sake of the children, I should say. He has taken aim at child care subsidies as class war against normal people, despite, or maybe because, such subsidies provide women with young kids more opportunities to work or go to school and be independent. By the way, in today's economy, most couples don't have the option of having the mother stay home. Even if they want that, it is incredibly difficult to make that work out given the fact that you need a dual income household just to make ends meet. So making it harder for women to find childcare, not really a popular position, even among some Republican voters, moderate Republican voters. And by the way, the final thing I'll say is, the thinking was that JD Vance would help Trump secure Ohio for sure, right? And that he would help appeal to the Rust Belt voters. But it turns out that that's really not playing out in Ohio. So with that said, let's go to the polling on that.
But if you look at Ohio, yeah, JD Vance won in 2022, but he only won by 6 points. That's worse than Donald Trump did in 2020. It's far worse than Mike DeWine did in 2022. He was the worst performing Republican candidate in 2022 up and down the ballot in the state of Ohio. He had nothing there.
All right, so Trump does very well with white working class voters. That's one of his superpowers. So what does Vance add?
Yeah, what does Vance add? Look, he won white working class voters. He won white voters without a college degree in the state of Ohio. But pretty much every Republican wins white working class voters. And if you look here, again, the margin that Vance put up was the weakest performance of any major Republican.
So look, I'm very curious to see how this plays out, Cenk. Do you think that Trump might have some buyer's remorse?
Yeah. Look, people have started to talk about, should they get rid of JD Vance?
Can you, I mean, I'm sure you probably can do that, but is there precedent for that?
Yes, but that would be astounding in modern day politics. And it would be such an admission of failure. It would be devastating. And look at this, guys, look. We had almost no chance of winning with Biden as the nominee. Now that Biden's not the nominee, what did we tell you? All of a sudden, we have all the chance in the world of winning. We're massive favorites all of a sudden, these guys are spinning out of control.
But don't you know, Cenk, anyone who advocated for Biden to drop out of the race, secret Trump supporter.
Yeah, by the way, all the folks who wanted Biden to stay in the race, you were accidentally helping Trump. Sorry, and I'm not blaming you like you guys blame me, right? But that actually was what was happening. So the next time you go to make that charge, be a little bit careful. All right, I gotta tell you the last couple of things here. JD Vance is Trump without the charm. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now
You're
you
right.
say, hey, Trump's not at all charming. I hear you, but for his voters and for some independents, they think he's funny. They think they like his stupid stories,
He
etc.
has charisma and he's a showman.
He's
right?
a showman.
Yeah,
right?
he is. He's good at that. He's good at public speaking. He's good at captivating an audience. JD Vance, based on what we've seen from him so far on the campaign trail, not the case.
Yeah, he's got serial killer eyes. So he's got huge issues. But last thing is to come back to our members here because it gives you a really good insight into how people are perceiving the comments about women that he made. And so I'll start out funny because you mentioned guys, and then I'll get to more serious ones. A YouTube member, Handy Dandy, said, "Speaking on behalf of single men, thank God for single women." Okay, so he's even losing that vote. Jesse said, "I know women who desperately wanted children but couldn't. Imagine how angry those folks are when these people are basically insinuating that if you don't have kids, what's your point? And that you don't have use."
Yeah, that's
it's terrible, terrible. Count One said, "I loved my stepmother and my parents who adopted me. They can F off with all this." Okay,
yeah.
And that's huge.
It's really bad messaging. It genuinely is.
So those are YouTube members, by the way. Hit the join button below and become part of the show, become part of the Young Turks. I'll do one last member from Twitch. Peachy Sherry wrote in, "I was terribly insulted when they said the only valid family is a father and mother and kids. My husband died. Is my family invalid?"
Oh my gosh. See, this is what I'm talking about. They have such a simplistic, stereotypical view of what like the family needs to be. And if the family isn't perfectly set up the way that they envision, oh, well, all the insults start flying. And it's gonna turn voters off. And remember, guys, the elections are not determined by the extremes on both sides. They're determined by the independent voters, the swing voters, and they tend to be a lot more moderate in their thinking. And so again, if the Trump campaign moves forward with this kind of disgusting messaging, it's gonna turn a lot of important voters for them off. Finally, I do wanna at least give Donald Trump an opportunity to express what he's feeling about JD Vance because he was asked point blank, like, do you regret JD Vance as your VP pick? Let's hear what he had to say.
You've made your vice presidential pick, but now that you know Kamala Harris is gonna be your opponent, would you have possibly gone in a different direction had you known that?
No, I do the same pick. I think he's doing really well. He's really caught on.
Okay, so for now, Trump is putting on a brave face and defending JD Vance, but we'll see how it plays out moving forward.
Okay, you can say that this is speculative and it's totally fine, but that Donald Trump did not seem excited.
There was a lack of riz in that reaction or response.
Because normally when Trump's excited, he's like, he's the best vice presidential candidate anybody's ever seen. No one's ever seen a vice presidential candidate like this. We're winning with him. Okay, we're getting tired of winning with him.
He'd be rambling on and on about how great JD Vance is, you're correct.
And in this case, he was like low energy Trump.
Low energy, and he moved on to something else immediately after that short statement.
Yeah, he's good, yeah, whatever. Okay, back to me. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.